The orbital scrap field of Kathrall 7 wasn't on any official charts. It hung in space like a wound that refused to heal, an endless halo of broken hulls, derelict freighters, snapped station rings, and the rib cages of ships that had once promised new worlds. To most species, it was a mausoleum. To a scattered handful of scavengers, it was a gold mine. The battered salvage cutter Starwright eased out of FTL wake, its patched engines coughing as they bled momentum. On the bridge, the viewport fanned the junkyard across the crew's faces, a cathedral of rust and glinting opportunity.
By the deep water moons,
Muttered Ishi, the sensor specialist, a willowy amphibious diplomat with translucent frills that trembled when anxious.
this field, it's older than the last chart update. Whoever left this didn't leave by accident.
Old graves can still hold good bones.
Said Lyra, hands steady on the pilot's yoke. Her braids swung against her shoulder, sparks of mischief in her eyes.
And good bones make good parts.
Harlan, engineering foreman and human enough to leave grease under his fingernails as a badge of honor, gave a low bark of laughter. He smelled of spent coolant and engine oil.
If you call rust and radiation good bones, then we're in a cathedral, lass.
At the center of the bridge, Captain Rowan kept his gaze level. Weathered and unflappable, he had the face of someone who'd spent more nights than days alive.
We're not taking souvenirs for fun. Sweep the area for active signatures. I don't want another crew claiming salvage rights, especially not Virgil claim ships.
Acknowledged.
Ishi replied, fingers dancing across a hollow slate. Thousands of fragments spun in the projection above the table, their trajectories ghosting in slow figures. Small pockets glowed with faint on energy, backup batteries, emergency beacons, lonely reactors still ticking.
No ownership signals.
Ishi said at last.
But movement, non-random.
Lyra grinned.
Perfect. Prize with drama.
The Starwright was a collage of mismatched panels, a thruster stolen from a freight runner here, a patched pressure bulkhead there. It flew, and in the economy of the outer sector, flying meant profit. They suited up in battered EVA frames, helmets streaked with stories. Lyra took point in the modular shuttle, Harlan and Ishi tucked in beside her, and Rowan brought up the rear with an old pulsar rifle that had seen more glares than action. The derelict they picked at was a Talesh heavy freighter, its ribs exposed and cargo bays yawning like the mouth of some sleeping leviathan. Lyra threaded the shuttle into its shadow and mag-clamped the hull with a satisfying thunk. The world outside was patient and black. Inside, the freighter was a cathedral of silence.
Stay sharp.
Rowan said into the comm, always the measured voice.
Assume nothing is inert. Don't touch anything warm unless you want a souvenir with teeth. And if something looks alive, it probably is.
The crew moved like muscle memory, small hands prying, sparking cutters singing, magnet tethers whistling. Lyra's light caught on a run of Talesh alloy conduits, pristine and rarer than claim flags. She whooped.
Jackpot.
She said.
These could outfit a dozen stabilizer frames.
Harlan grunted.
Or pay for a month of hot food. Either way, worth the risk.
Ishi's frills tightened.
Some of this gear still runs on backup cycles. After how long?
Long-lived systems, good maintenance, or a very stubborn ghost.
Rowan answered.
Either way, move.
They worked in a rhythm until a metallic rasp cut through the hull like a fingernail over glass. Ishi froze, crest rising.
Movement.
He said.
Below us, not life as we know it.
They held their breaths behind helmets as a shadow shifted in the freighter's belly. Then a shape unfolded, angular limbs and jointed plates, eyes dim but alive with a reactor that had found a way to endure. A sentinel drone creaked into motion like a fossil stirring. Its optics flared. A thin, desperate shriek passed through the oxygen-starved corridors as the drone pivoted and accelerated. Contact. Lyra kicked free and raced down a passage as the drone lunged. Sparked cutters sparked crazily. Harlan hurled a charged conduit into the corridor. When the drone slammed into it, electricity spat like a newborn star. The thing convulsed and toppled, disabled but still twitching. They hauled it out to the shuttle like a captured insect. Ishi muttered prayers soft as bubbles.
Why would you bring that aboard?
He asked as Harlan tightened straps.
Because anything that survives out here likely knows more than any paper chart.
Rowan said firm.
And because a salvage-minded mind is a curious one. We study it, and maybe it tells us who dropped this field. Or it's a scrap of alloy we can sell.
Or it's a nightmare that wakes up at 3 a.m. and decides to slice us into stars.
Ishi shot back. Lyra slapped the drone with a grin.
Optimism, Ishi. We're humans. We convert problems into solutions, usually with duct tape and swearing.
Back aboard the Starwright, other eyes watched them. A half-sunk freighter across the field held the smug outline of a Virgil claim ship. Its crew hunched inside, skin hammered bronze and eyes narrowed. Their captain Core bared his teeth in a slow, dangerous smile.
Humans,
He said to his crew.
always looking for ghosts to fight. We'll let them pick and choose and then we'll take the best.
His chatter clacked like mandibles. But in their eyes there was something else, respect, or something close to it. Humans had a reputation here. They came out of the junkyard with more than they went in with. Sometimes that meant parts. Sometimes it meant trouble. The Starwright sat like a scar over the ring of wreckage. In the mess hall, Lyra tinkered with a salvaged drone arm, coaxing a servo to life with a spatula and a prayer. Harlan scowled over a schematic while Ishi recorded telemetry.
Be careful,
Rowan said.
we can't afford a scrap with the Virgil. Not today.
Relax.
Lyra replied, sparks popping.
That arm's going to be our lucky charm.
The ship's comm chirped. AMI, the ship assistant, gave its neutral tone.
Incoming transmission. Virgil claim ship issuing warnings. They demand all humans depart the sector.
Rowan pinched the bridge of his nose.
Of course.
You know what they want.
Harlan said, voice flat.
Everything that moves, and most of what doesn't.
2 hours later, the salvage skiff dropped again, hull rattling as magnetic tides washed through the field. They tunneled into the heart of a collapsed destroyer, pried through crumpled decks, and found a cache of alloy as they'd hoped. Lyra wedged herself into a thruster housing, humming, while Harlan and Ishi hauled panels and circuits. Then the sky around the wreckage grew darker, searchlights sweeping, engines screaming. Virgil skimmers, angular and merciless, circled like hunting beetles. From their comms, a clicking voice said,
Abandon your theft or be reduced to slag.
Rowan let a slow grin form.
They're early.
Ishi's crest shivered.
They won't take kindly to us keeping the spoils.
Then we make it a costly victory.
Harlan said.
Get everything secured. Martin, AMI, prep the skiff for emergency launch. Lyra, jolt the thruster out and get moving.
Lyra was halfway inside the thruster, muttering a battered tune.
I'm on it.
The Virgil descended, searchlights blinding. Their skimmers dropped, grappling lines and demand beacons. The air around the wreckage thrummed with tension. Rowan made a decision that would split the thread of their fortunes.
Back to the Starwright. Bring the drone. If we can reverse engineer its systems, maybe we can get a jump on these clowns.
Harlan hesitated but obeyed. They dragged the wounded sentinel across the deck, straps biting into plating, and lashed it down in the Starwright's cargo bay. It twitched like a sleeping thing and let out a low mechanical whine.
Can you make it talk?
Lyra asked, hope and mischief braided together. Harlan frowned.
Maybe we can coax a signal, but we're not experts in ancient war drones.
Ishi's tentacles brushed the casing.
It's built with foreign math. This one, it's older than the Virgil designs I know.
Rowan sat back and watched the junkyard through the viewport. The Virgil skimmers kept circling, like vultures who'd tasted blood. He thought of their dwindling supplies, of the way the Starwright shuddered under a heavy jump, and of the stubborn human habit. When cornered, they made themselves useful.
We'll bargain.
He said simply.
We'll take what we can and run. We don't fight a full Virgil claim flanked, eh?
He did not say they might have to leave some things behind, or that sometimes survival counted as a victory. At that precise point, far beneath the ring of wreckage and beyond the planet's thin atmosphere, something else shifted in the darkness. a disturbance the salvage crew could not see. A transport, pocked and angular, descended into the planet's thick forests. Its ramp hissed open like a blade. From its interior spilled living hunters, sentinels more terrifying than drones. Warriors bred and augmented for a sport older than the Dominion's current appetite. They moved with fluid, brutal grace. On the ground, a ragged group of survivors watched skyward. They were not one species, but many. Kai, a wiry human with sun-cracked skin and a knack for stealing from the Dominion crates. Mira, a quiet tracker whose eyes missed nothing. Grell, a broad-chested Rathani warrior who could snap branches with a thought. And Rav, a scaled outcast who kept his distance but whose cunning had kept them alive. They had been collected like toys by the Dominion and dumped into a hunting ground for other species to play at predation. The Sentinels advanced. They were not programmed to negotiate. The survivors fought, and for every hunter felled, 2 more rose. The ground shook and vines erupted, where Rob whispered a sigil and dragged a charging machine down long enough for Kai and Grell to jab blades into joints and shatter plating with unrefined tools. When they couldn't push anymore, they did something crazier than retreat. They stole the hunter's transport. Scrambling aboard its ramp, they forced the ramp shut just as a sentinel slammed against it. They fought their way to the controls. None were pilots, but Rav's studied hands moved as if he'd read the language of Dominion craft before. The ship roared, part hope, part stolen chance, and they blasted out of the hunting ground. Below them, sentinels clawed at the hull. Above them, the Dominion would notice, and an ugly problem would now live in the sky. The Starwright's crew did not know about the stolen transport. Their problem was smaller and closer and insulted by the Virgil. The Virgil Captain Corps sent a comm.
You have 1 minute to surrender salvage rights.
Rowan answered with the same bluntness he'd carried since the Starwright's commissioning.
We'll leave 1 crate. You'll get the rest. We'll buy our getaway. Maintain distance.
Corps' laugh was like a saw.
We accept your terms. For the price of compliance, we will allow you to depart.
A tense swap unfolded. Lyra slid the thruster into the skiff. Harlan handed over a crate of components. The Virgil skimmers backed away. Enough. Not friendly, but sufficient. They lifted off, engines tugging at the Starwright as the hull strained. Their bay was full of grudging victory and the twitching sentry drone, and the salvage cost them sweat and fear.
Close call.
Ishi breathed, and the ship exhaled with them. But in the cargo bay, the Sentinel drone began to vibrate with a new, different kind of energy. A faint glow pulsed in its optics. Then a data strobe spilled across consoles. Harlan stared at the readouts and swore softly.
It's not dead,
He said.
it's waking.
Lyra, who'd always favored curiosity over caution, leaned in. A staccato of sparks skittered along the drone's casing, and then a voice, cold and measured, not quite human, spoke inside the ship's air like a release valve.
Host vessel recognized. Await protocol. Query.
Rowan's eyes narrowed.
Protocol for what?
The drone's optics blinked and some internal network routed through AMI. Data spilled, a capsule of old coordinates, registry fragments, and a fragment of command code. Harlan traced the lines with fingers that smelled of ozone.
It's broadcasting a recovery key,
He said.
a beacon, for something bigger.
Ishi's frills rose in a shiver.
It's a breadcrumb. Old war machine, pointing somewhere.
Rowan considered the odds. Return to Kathrall 7 permanently laden, chase a breadcrumb that might lead to riches or disaster. He thought of the Starwright as a scarred, stubborn thing that would not live forever, and of his crew, half family and half chosen trouble.
We follow the trail.
He said. Lyra whooped and punched the air.
Of course we do.
Harlan shook his head, smiling despite himself.
You people and your choices.
They took the transport's breadcrumb like a compass and burned a careful course across a sector of empty dark. The drone, now more companion than captive, hummed in the cargo hold, its optics flicking like a sleeping animal. Data led them to a derelict that mapmakers had simply called Station D-17, a half-buried ring the size of a small city, tumbling slowly in an old, eccentric orbit. The signal had history, It pulsed with the registry of a long-fallen flotilla command. The drone's code unlocked a hatch and a door side open like a mouth. Inside the station was a ruin that smelled of old ozone and colder decisions. But there were things that still lived. A faint grid of defense turrets, a cargo vault humming with dormant power, and a vault bay stamped with an insignia none of them recognized. The drone guided them to a chamber where artifacts sat like gravestones, crates labeled in a dead language, a folded banner stitched in gold, and beyond a reinforced vault door that the drone insisted should open.
You sure about this?
Ishi asked. His physiology translated fear into a series of tight pulls on his frills.
We didn't come this far to let fear tidy our pockets.
Lyra said. Harlan knelt by the console, reading aging code like lines of scripture. He coaxed, bribed, and threatened the locks into compliance. The vault doors sighed open, ancient gears grinding free after centuries. Light spilt out, and the crew blinked like the first creatures emerging from a long cave. Inside the vault rested a small fleet of devices and a single folded project schematic the size of a table. It spoke in schematics and algorithms and a promise, a way to reconfigure defensive drones into autonomous shepherds, to weave old Dominion field tech into a system that would defend a ring of wreckage as if it were a living barrier.
And it's legal?
Ishi asked, voice small against the vault's echo.
Legal.
Harlan barked a laugh.
When have Salvage and Law been intimate friends?
Rowan's jaw tightened. The implications were enormous. If they retrofitted the Starwright with adaptive defense drones and converted a few old turrets into autonomous guardians, the salvage field could be theirs, unassailable to patrols and claimers. It could mean prosperity. It could mean a target. Lyra's grin went quiet with thought.
We could keep the junkyard fed for a decade.
We could make enemies of powerful people.
Ishi added.
Every useful thing makes enemies,
Harlan said.
Better to be useful than empty.
Rowan made a decision not unlike the ones that had defined him. Take the risk. Shape the future.
We do it.
He looked at his crew.
We do it for the Starwright, and for anyone who wants a piece of freedom in this dead place.
They worked then with a desperate, careful joy. Harlan and Lyra turned the drone into a template, rewiring and recoding, while Ishi translated ancient Dominion schematics into workable blueprints. The Sentinel, a puzzle and a key, supplied algorithms and telemetry that the Starwright's crew coaxed into servitude. In the mess hall, amid spilled coffee and the clatter of tools and laughter that tasted like relief, the plan took shape. Weeks passed in a compression of labor and small victories. The Starwright's new guardians, smaller drones fitted with the Sentinel's stubborn will, patrolled defined corridors. Turrets rose from rusted pedestals and hummed with fresh firmware. The field around Kathrall 7, once a free-for-all buffet, became a walled garden patrolled by a ragtag band of reprogrammed sentients. The Virgil returned, engines bright and teeth bared. Their captain corps raged at a space now dotted with vigilant watchers. Skimmers dipped into sectors and met the new drones. They found their grappling hooks shattered by automated net arrays and their claim flags taken down and tossed into vacuum.
You humans think you can change the rules?
Core barked one morning in a transmission that rattled the Starwright's hull. Rowan met the challenge in the only way he knew, the slow, honest voice that had kept them alive.
We've always been changing the rules. We just did it with fewer favors and more elbow grease.
The Virgil snarled and withdrew. Core was practical. He would bide time and wait for a weak moment. But the Starwright had bought itself air and tenacity. Word travels in the scrap field, and it travels fast to the right ears. Other crews came, not all friendly, not all enemies. A loose collective of small-time scavengers, frayouter crews, and a few outcast researchers arrived asking for trade and protection. The Guardians watched, and many chose to stay. A small community grew in the shadow of ruined hulls, barter stalls, engine forges, a med tent run on canned synth stew and goodwill. And somewhere in the skies, a stolen Dominion transport flew with 4 refugees who had once been hunted and humiliated. Kai, Mira, Grell, and Rob watched the ring below from a stolen viewport as they found new purpose in the stolen ship's belly. They would trade their knowledge of Dominion design and hunting patterns in exchange for safe harbor. When they made contact, it was cautious. Rav's hands never stopped moving when he spoke. Kai never stopped checking for exits. But in the mess hall of the Starwright, over rationed coffee that belied the bitter years, they built a bridge of trust. The scavengers needed survival intelligence. The escapees needed a place to root. The Starwright offered both. The Sentinel drone, reborn, sat in the bay, now named Argos for the way its optics watched and remembered. It chirped and clicked in a language only a few understood. Its data core hummed with fragments of the Dominion's long quiet networks. And over time, it offered up more than salvage leads. It showed them a map of a hidden archive, a place where the Dominion had kept a catalog of experimental craft, pieces that could be converted, repurposed, and fitted to defend the Junkyard forever. The work was long and stinging and stitched with the small sorrows of sacrifice. Harlan lost a hand in a calibration blast and fashioned a new one from old servos and stubbornness. Ishi learned to laugh like a human when Lyra rigged a coffee machine that used steam pressure as if it were a small star. Rowan's hair grew a little grayer. He smiled, lean and rare, when he watched his crew teach newcomers how to read old schematics. They made enemies. Dominion patrols sent probes that the Guardians burned or pried from falling. Corps' grudges simmered but found no easy reservoir to exploit, and a coalition of claimers tried to bribe their way in. Each time, the Starwright answered with improvised defenses, with old tech reworked into teeth. Each time they held. And then, one long dawn, if such a thing could be said to exist in the dark of Kathrall 7, a transmission trickled in on a frequency that had been dead for ages. It was a name, a lost colony, a registry, a promise that the scattered signals in the Sentinel's memory had been pointing to all along. The salvage whores and engineers around the mess table leaned forward.
We did more than keep the field.
Lyra whispered. Rowan swallowed.
We kept a place where people could survive on their own terms.
They had turned ghosts into guardians and scavenged a future from the bones of wars. The Starwright's crew were not saints. They were pragmatists and thieves and dreamers, stitched together into something better than the sum of their grudges. The final test came as it always did, unexpected, brutal, and oddly intimate. A Dominion frigate, sleek and official, dropped into orbit like a question mark. It broadcast a demand. Return the stolen transport and the escaped captives. Surrender the stolen Dominion tech and submit to inspection. The fleet behind it hummed with the weight of politics and teeth. The Starwright's crew convened on the bridge. Outside, Guardians hummed and turrets watched. Inside, arguments flared and hands were slammed, and then quiet settled. Rowan rose and looked at each of them. Lyra, Harlan, Ishi, Argos, the refugees who no longer felt like strangers, and the new faces of the community who'd come to trust the Starwright's flag.
We can hand them over and be small again,
He said.
or we can stand as we are. We have a right to this place now, not by law, but by work and by what we protect.
Lyra's smile was a thin, fierce thing.
We don't hand over people.
Harlan flexed a new servo hand and notched a grin.
We defend what we build.
Ishi's frills rose in a solemn, ocean-deep exhale.
Then let the Dominion learn how stubborn a ring of scavengers can be.
When the frigate's boarding pods smashed atmosphere and descended, it met more than a few surprises. Sentinels that danced like ghosts and lashed like storms. A community that refused to be erased. Argos and its kin, reconfigured to not only destroy, but to shepherd and warn. They used Dominion code turned against its makers, non-lethal deterrence, overwhelming networks that turned a precision strike into a chaotic failure. The Dominion's deck teams found themselves entangled in nets and confronted by a people who fought smarter than they expected. Not because the Starwright's crew were better warriors, they were not, but because they had something most military forces neglected: improvisation, stubborn love for the little things they built, and an unwillingness to surrender their own. The frigate lifted away bruised and confused. Its commanders logged the event and signed petitions and filed formal complaints that would take months to digest in bureaucratic meat grinders. The Starwright didn't win a war that day. It won a defense, a reprieve, and a reputation that would echo through the salvage lanes for years. In the aftermath, under a sky of meteor-smeared black and a ring that creaked like settling timber, the Starwright's crew gathered around the mess hall table. They were tired, patched, and dented, but whole in a way that mattered. Rowan tapped a glass, an old thing, dented but clean.
To the Starwright,
He said simply.
to stubbornness.
To the Guardians.
Lyra added, and someone whooped.
To Argos.
Harlan said, and the drone's optics pulsed like a contented blink.
To the lost things that taught us how to build new ones.
Ishi said, and it felt like a benediction. They ate, they joked about small catastrophes they had survived. They made plans to map the Dominion archive that had been hinted at by the Sentinel's data. The salvage community would grow. The Junkyard would be a place that offered refuge and danger in equal measure. And in that balance, there was life. The Starwright still had screws to tighten and holes to patch. It would always. But under its worn hull, a different engine had started up. One made of people who refused to be invisible. They had taken a graveyard and, with duct tape and stubbornness and an unlikely ally, turned it into a harbor. And somewhere on the edge of a dark sector, a small fleet of reprogrammed guardians kept watch, lenses flicking across the expanse, listening for movement. When a lost transport or a lonely beacon called, the Starwright set course, not because it had to, but because hope was a kind of salvage worth everything. They had begun as thieves among wrecks. They ended, if ending was the right word, as something larger, keepers of a place where the discarded were returned to use, where a rescued sentinel could become a watchful friend, and where a ragtag crew of engineers could make a small, stubborn home amid the bones of dead worlds.